thanks for joining us this morning. Excuse my voice. I'm fighting it a little bit, but with God's grace, we'll get through this message. We are at the end of January, so we're 1/12 of the way through 24 already, if you want to look at it that way. And we've been in a message series discussing character. Today, we're going to talk about the final aspect of building good character, and it's giving. So some of y'all can take your hands off your wallet. I'm not going to ask you for any money. We self-fund and do everything here internally. So we're going to talk about, though, a heart of generosity and what God tells us about giving in the Bible. Now, we all have heard God loves a cheerful giver. It reminds me of a story about a tithing situation. Peter Marshall was a chaplain in the United States Senate. And he tells a story that years ago, one of the senators came into his office and said, "Peter, I got a problem. When I started off here in Washington in this business years ago, I was making $20,000 a year. And it wasn't hard giving $2,000 in tithe every year." He goes, "But I'm now making $500,000 a year. And $50,000, it just seems like too much." And Peter, the chaplain, said, "Yeah, that's a problem." And he thought about it, and he says, "Do you mind if I pray over you?" And the senator said, "Please do." So Peter gets up, walks over, puts his hand on the senator, and says this short, sweet prayer. He said, "Dear God, please reduce this man's salary to a level where he can afford to give again." And sometimes we're in that same mindset. We start out giving, but as our wealth and our possessions increase, we start thinking, wow, it's a bigger chunk. We don't think it's still 10%, and that God blessed us with the original number anyway. It's just we start looking at a specific number. Now, there's joy in giving because we know giving pleases God. And when you give out of love and joy for the Lord, just think about how excited He is with us. One of my favorite studies in college was the one about the monkey fist. And a group of scientists went to this island where they had these monkeys. So these monkeys were not in cages or scientific. They were on an island. And the scientists would go to the island every day in their little boat, and they would feed them these little fruit snacks. And the monkeys just loved it. And they just gave these monkeys all they wanted, and they could just eat till their heart was content. Well, after a period of time, the scientists took a coconut and cut a hole in it, and they dropped the snacks in the coconut. They show up to the island, they feed the little monkeys till they're all eating. Then they drop them, they hand them the coconut. Now, they cut the hole in the coconut so the monkey would have to squeeze his hand through the hole to grab the prize. But when he did that, he made a fist, and he couldn't pull his hand off the coconut. So all the monkeys were walking around slinging their arms with a coconut. And the scientists would offer them more food, more treats. And yet the monkeys refused to let go and unclench their fist. And sometimes we have that same scarcity mindset. We think, this is mine. Even though we're fully provided for and we have more than enough, and God is there continually to provide us and give us more, we stick our hand in that coconut and we clench and we don't want to let go. And instead of walking around with two free hands, we walk around with a big old coconut on our hand trying to shake it loose. 2 Corinthians 9:6 says, "Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." A lot of people flip that into the image of a farmer. The more seeds you plant, the bigger the crop. One seed, if you plant a single seed, you get one plant. You plant a tomato seed, you get a tomato plant. But that tomato plant does something incredible. It can produce 16 tomatoes, which have 60 to 80 seeds in it. So start doing the math. The multiplication is exponential. And that's how God gives to us. Our God is a God of multiplication. Now today we're going to talk about more than just money. Money's not really the focus here at all. See, God gave us the greatest gift ever. And we can never outgive what He gave us through His Son, Jesus Christ. So we've already received the greatest gift of mankind. And that gift should be passed on. And it's a free gift, and He extends it to us. And when we accept that gift and put Jesus in our heart, we step into grace and eternal salvation. Now, if you're walking around with that type of gift, what do you do with that gift? Are you like the monkey? Are you just hanging on to it and no one else can get it? Or are you sharing? Are you spreading the gospel? If I tell 2 friends about Jesus and they tell 2 friends, 4 people know. And if those 4 go out and tell 2 friends, it becomes 8. Then 16, then 32, then 64, then 128, then 256, then keep doing the math, I quit. But you get the point. It becomes exponential. And we shouldn't hold on to God's gift. Tell people. And we can give in so much more ways than just financially. Ask yourself this, what type of seeds have you been planting lately? Seeds of encouragement? Is there somebody you need to encourage? Seeds of hope for a brighter tomorrow. Seeds of wisdom and knowledge, things you've learned and experiences you've gained that you're sharing or mentoring with somebody younger than you perhaps. And what are some ways we can give back to God? Well, we know there's the tithe, the first 10%. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We have our talents. We have the abilities that God gave us. Some of us can sing. Some of us can write. Some of us can run fast. Some of us are good on computers, whatever it may be. And God gave us time. And the beautiful thing about time is we all have the exact same amount of it. No one has more time than the other. We each have the same amount of time every day. So time, sometimes we say, well, I don't have enough money to tithe, or I'm really not good at anything. But we all have the same amount of time. And time is something we can give anybody. Now, there was a little boy who was sitting at church, and it was Communion Sunday, and the communion plate was coming down the pew. And you know, communion, excuse me, you get a little glass of grape juice, you get a little cracker, right? You've been in communion before. So as the plate came down with the little grape juice and the cracker, the little boy decided he's going to get a snack. But his mom tells him, no, you're too young to participate, takes the plate and passes it on down, to which he kind of rolls his eyebrows. Later in the service, the offering plate comes down, and as the offering plate's coming down, the little boy's clenching a nickel, and the mom encourages him to put the nickel in the offering plate, to which he responds, I don't eat, I don't pay. And if you think about it, we all have that mindset. What's in it for me? I don't eat, I ain't paying. What's in it for me? What's the return? Galatians 6:7 says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. And all that says is, whatever you put into anything in life, whatever you give and plant, whether it's in other people, your own life, and your families, you're going to get that back. That's the type of blessings. If you plant seeds of hate and discord, you're going to get a lot of hate and discord. If you plant seeds of love and encouragement, you're going to see the produce, the fruit of those efforts. Now, it not be how you think about it. It may not be when you see it. You may not even see those benefits to eternity. But they're there, and God promises you will reap what you sow. Now let's talk about tithing versus giving. So the tithe's the first 10%, which seems odd because God gave us His Son Jesus as a sacrifice to die on a cross for us for things He didn't even do, and He asked us for 10%. Well, the first 10% belongs to God anyway, because He owns and everything that we have is from Him to begin with. So when you're tithing is returning to God what already belongs to Him. So you can't give something that doesn't belong to you in the first place. So when we tithe from our income, our bonuses, financial gain, whatever, when we give our 10% back, we're giving back to God what already belongs to Him. It's only when we give above and beyond that now we are truly giving, because now that's beyond the initial 10. And I don't want to make this about money, because there's giving of your time and other things. Now I want to be clear, giving of your time, volunteering, teaching somebody skills, talents, that's not tithing. That's giving of a resource or a skill or a talent that God gave. That's not tithing. Tithing is the first 10%. And it's been proven and studied that your money is always the hardest area to trust God with. You can trust God with your family, your children, your marriage, economy. But man, when it comes to your money, that's a hard one. It's always the last one to fall for people following Christ. And giving financially is hard. But we need to believe and understand that we rely on God as our provider. God doesn't need your money. We all know that. But what He's looking for is your faithfulness, your obedience, and your trust. That's really what's being put up here. And we just have to take the mindset that God can do more with 90% than you can do with 100%. But expecting God to repay you back is really kind of limiting God, if you think about it. It's kind of putting Him in a box. Because the blessings aren't limited to money, but goodness and peace and joy and other attributes of the Spirit. Sometimes we say, well, God, I'm going to give you $100. Let's see if you can give me 120 back. I'll take 20% rate of return. That's not how it works. We give from a cheerful heart, and God replenishes. He might give it back to you in money. I don't know. He might give it to you in a lot of ways. It may help fuel the mission. It may help lead a young kid in a Sunday school to Christ. It may put food on somebody's table that doesn't have food for the evening. But we have to trust God, and we should not give just to get back, but we need to give from a pure heart. The return that we'll receive from God is so much more valuable than money. It's a spiritual blessing and a spiritual return. And the tithe is documented in the Bible in Leviticus 27:30. 1/10 of the produce of the land, whether grain from the fields or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It must be set apart to Him as holy. So that first 10, set apart, means the first. It's not you pay all your bills, and if there's anything left over, it's the first 10. And then we trust God with the rest. And we set it apart. Why? Because God's Word tells us it's holy. It belongs to Him. Above all else, whatever you decide to give to God, whether you're a financial giver or somebody that gives encouragement or training or you coach or whatever it is, we need to always remember to praise and give thanks to God above all, for He's good. We should always seek His righteousness and His kingdom first. Give your best to God every day. One of my favorite stories is about the widow in Mark, chapter 12, verse 41 through 44. The widow's offering. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put, and He watched the crowd put their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw large amounts, but a poor widow came, and she put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. Calling His disciples to Him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you this, poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." And it's a powerful story. You can sit there and imagine Jesus sitting there watching all these people making a big spectacle. Look what I've given. Look how much I've got. And this poor, humble widow lady, who's not allowed to work in those times, has no one to take care of her, puts in 2 little pennies. And Jesus notices this, and he calls his disciples, guys, come here. You see that? She gave the most. And they're puzzled. Well, she gave 2 pennies. What do you mean she gave the most? See, she gave 100%. She gave everything she had. And God looks at each of us individually and blesses us according to our ability to give and our ability to steward and to manage the blessings he gives us. So it's not about money. It's trusting in God when we give our best effort every day. Do not think of God's generosity, provision as a bucket. Think of it as a river. We think, okay, I only have this bucket of money, this bucket of food, this bucket of whatever. This bucket's mine. And if I give some out of the bucket, my bucket gets smaller. To the point if I keep giving, I run out. But that's not how God's generosity and provision works. God's provision's like a river. You stand on a river bank and you look to the north and you can't see where the water comes from. And you look to the south and you can't see where the water ends. Yet the water continues to pass by you. God is constantly replenishing, reloading, and providing. And that's the mindset we need to have. God has unlimited resources, and you cannot outgive God. So this past Christmas, I saw an interesting story from a lady. She was telling a reporter her husband really didn't like Christmas. Now don't get me wrong, he was a very devoted Christian. He loved the true meaning of Christmas. But he really didn't like the commercialism, the hustle bustle, the ads, the trying to outdo everybody, and all the charades that go around it. He just really thought it was being commercialized, and we were diluting the true meaning of Christmas. And he always told her, I got more than enough, I don't want anything. So one year she had an idea. Years ago, whatever money she was going to spend on his gift, she put that money in an envelope and wrote his name on it and put it under the Christmas tree. And so when they got up, they had 3 kids. 3 kids would come in, everybody open their gifts in the morning like most of us do in our families. And he saw the envelope and she says, instead of me buying you a Christmas gift, I'm giving you this to give as you want. And he said it's the greatest gift he ever had. So after they did their morning thing, they loaded up the car, and he went and he knew some family in need, and he gave them the envelope with the wife and the kids. And that became their Christmas tradition. Every year she would take the envelope, put his Christmas money in there that was allocated for him, and instead of buying him a coat or boots or whatever, he would then load the family up and they'd go give it to a family in need. Well, a little over a year ago, the man got cancer, and he died right after this past Thanksgiving. And the wife was devastated. She'd never been through Christmas without her husband. And she admits she was so depressed and so doom and gloom, she had to muster the energy a couple weeks before Christmas just to even put the tree up for the children. And she was really struggling to get through the holidays last Christmas. And on Christmas Eve, as she was sitting in the living room by herself, she had this idea. I'm going to honor my late husband. She took some money, she put it in an envelope and wrote his name on it, and she put it under the tree. Then she went to bed. When she got up the next morning and walked up to the tree, she began to cry. There were 3 other envelopes under that tree from each of the kids. The kids had decided amongst themselves to do the same thing. They took what little money they had, put it in an envelope for their dad, and wrote his name on it. So there was 4 envelopes of money with their dad's name. And it was the best Christmas she ever had. They celebrated, she loaded them up, and each kid got to go. They went around to people in need, and each kid got to give away the money that their dad would have had to continue their legacy. It reminds me of 2 Corinthians 9, 7 through 8. You must each decide in your hearts how much to give. And do not give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. and God will generously provide all that you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. You see, these kids did not give under pressure or reluctance. They didn't even know their mom did it. She didn't even mention it to them. And yet, when she came out, she was so moved by their generosity. They had the same thought process that their father's legacy left behind. So in conclusion, we love because God first loved us. We know God is love. We also know God is a giver. And if we're going to follow Christ and be obedient to the cross, we need to be more generous and give as well. So what can you give today? Maybe you just have 2 pennies. That's okay. Give it your all. Can you give your 100% to God today? Just give your best. Maybe it's just encouragement. Maybe you know somebody is really going through a difficult time and they just need some encouragement. Give them that. Maybe you know somebody needs a hug. They're suffering a loss. They're just really struggling with something mentally. They just need a hug to know someone cares. A random act of kindness. Give that. Maybe you have a skill at work and there's a new coworker or a younger member of the team and you've got a spreadsheet skill or a certain technique, a way you do a trade. Teach them that. Give that away. Maybe you can just give somebody your smile. Because we all walk around with a frown on our face. And we all walk around worried about the pressure of the world. And we forget that God is our provider. But whatever you give today, let's all give God praise for another glorious day and for always providing for us. Give cheerfully and watch God replenish your spirit. God bless you. Have a great week. And we look forward to seeing you next month in February.